Bioware sucks now. We can all see it. The decline is obvious. But let me show you how it happened, why it happened, how you can figure out what companies it's about to happen to, and hopefully how this trend will stop in the future. But first up, let me prove that Bioware sucks. So here's a graphic of games that Bioware has made. On the left, you'll see games they made before an event I call the Hallowing. In the middle, you'll see games that were happening at the end of the Hallowing. And then on the right, you'll see games that happened after the Hallowing. And what you'll notice is there's an obvious and direct decline in the quality of the games after the Hallowing. So let's talk about what the Hallowing is and how it happens. So the Hallowing is something that happens to a company that start getting publicly traded. So if they're on the stock market, the company will start getting hollowed out. Why does that happen? So people think that a company is just greedy and they start making games and all they care about is making a bunch of money. Yes, that's true, but there's a lot more to it. So a Hallowing is basically the CEO and the board of trustees, as well as all the developers and designers, acquiescing to the needs of the shareholders because of something called fiduciary responsibility. So as a shareholder of a company, anyone that works within that company that has any type of an executive level role, so a CEO, a president, all of the board of advisors, they have a fiduciary responsibility, which means that they have to do anything they can to try to make you, as a shareholder, as much money as possible. So the moment that a company becomes publicly traded, a CEO has to try to make games that make the most money possible. They no longer make games with the ethos or the moral values of, I'm going to make the best gaming experience possible. So that means that core value that is instilled in everyone when they're a smaller company of make the best game possible gets hollowed out. So first and foremost, you get rid of the CEO, you get rid of the board of advisors if they don't play ball. So if they're not trying to make as much money for the shareholders as possible, they're going to be fired and they'll bring in someone else who's going to do that job. So then the CEO is forced to follow that ethos of make as much money as possible. So is the board of advisors. Anyone that's a developer, designer, programmer that doesn't go along with this narrative will eventually be kicked out. So that's the hollowing of their moral values. And that happens normally over the course of 3 to 4 years. Sometimes it's 5 years, sometimes a little bit longer. And there are caveats to this. So for example, Take-Two is a publicly traded company that owns Rockstar. Take-Two has not hollowed out Rockstar yet because Rockstar games make so much money. If at any point they were to stumble a little bit and have a game that didn't make a ton of money, the Hallowing would start almost immediately. And it's a quick downward spiral because your best game designers and developers are the ones that care about making the best experiences. So as the ethos changes, they're going to leave basically immediately. So once it starts, it's almost guaranteed to be a race to the bottom. And that's what we're seeing at BioWare right now. So all of the good designers, all of the good developers, all of the good programmers are, I want to say slowly, but fairly quickly leaving the company. And you can see that it's a race to the bottom, a la Anthem. Anthem had a amazing core gameplay loop, but it just unfortunately wasn't going to make them any money, so they just canned it and said everyone move over to Dragon Age Veilguard, which now is their new dumpster fire, unfortunately for all of us gamers. So let's go back to this and talk about the actual Hallowing itself. At the end of the Hallowing, when all of the developers and the designers are no longer people who are trying to make the best game experience, they're either yes men or they're people who are just looking to make the most money because that's what their boss tells them to do. You will have some games that were being developed before the Hallowing finished that will come out, a la Mass Effect 3, Star Wars The Old Republic, those games where the core is okay, but there are obvious issues with the game. It's nowhere near as polished as the earlier games. You'll notice that there's a decline, but it's still pretty good. And then after that, you're going to start seeing games where the decline is very obvious because the game started to get worked on after the Hallowing had finished. So what we're going to see is, you know, whatever next 3-4 games that Bioware comes out with, if they get that far along, are going to get worse and worse. So what will happen is Bioware employees continue to get laid off, and the CEO calls it getting lean, is eventually the company will fail and basically they'll get sold off or they'll get closed down entirely, and EA will go find its next company to cannibalize. And that's just going to continue until the entire industry decides to change. Microtransactions do have some value. Obviously, you can have games like Rocket League where the game itself is free and no one has to pay anything, but that's just not going to be the case for most games, especially games coming from sub-companies of EA. They're trying to extract as much money from you as possible, so they're going to do all the battle passes and the premium cosmetics and all of the one-time buffs and all the crap that we hate so much. But my hope is there's an end in sight. In the next few years, I think that your average consumer either isn't going to take it or won't be able to take it just because they're trying to siphon so much money out, and the games will be unplayable unless you're incredibly rich. So I'm thinking there's going to be a correction. I think the AAA game studios are probably, most of them will go under, and some indie studios will rise up, and hopefully there'll be some laws that are changed so that way all of these microtransactions that are siphoning all the value out of people, hopefully it changes. But let me know what you think down in the comments. What are the most egregious things that publicly traded companies are doing to siphon money out of us? Some people would say the microtransactions. I actually think it's the games as a service where they release a game long before it's ready to drop. But you tell me what you think down below. And if you like this video and you want some more gaming news and opinions, please subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.